A matte painting of a city is pooped on by a ship that looks like the end of Doctor Who's sonic screwdriver. How appropriate, as it changes history so that the city never existed. We discover the screwdriver ship is commanded by Clarence Bodicker from RoboCop, so you know they're wrong uns. It seems they're making changes to the timeline in order to try and achieve what they call the target event, but this latest change didn't do the job. Clarence says they're thinking too small and wants to go to the homeworld of the colony they just removed so they can erase their entire species. Told you they were wrong uns. Before we continue, the standard warning about my general dislike of time travel episodes should probably be repeated. That said, the idea of influencing things to achieve a certain outcome reminds me of an old PC game called Millennia Altered Destinies, so maybe nostalgia will carry me through this one. To Voyager, where we discover yet another new set. This time it's the repeatedly referenced astrometrics lab that Seven and Kim have been working on for the last few episodes. It's basically a big map room, and Seven says it'll knock 5 years off their journey, which, by my calculation, puts them at a speedy 52 years left on the clock. There's a bonus too, as Seven's been able to fill in many of the gaps with data gathered by the Borg. As an aside, this essentially replaces Neelix in his obsolete role as guide, and I confess I'm not sure how I feel about that. Having Neelix provide the background data of whoever we came across meant we had to spend less of the runtime on exploring it organically, but also somewhat undermined the feeling of discovery. Seven providing detailed tactical data for what's coming risks exacerbating that problem. Anyway, she says we'll be meeting the Zal, an advanced but peaceful race, so that'll make a change. Chakotay wants us all back to work, but the doc has a speech prepared, and it even takes a shot at Paris, so that's nice. He's interrupted before getting into full swing by a ship hailing us, much to the delight of everybody else present. By the time Janeway gets to the bridge, that hailing ship has escalated to pooping at us. It doesn't pose any real threat, so we give it a call and ask them what the bloody hell they think they're doing. We're greeted by this guy, and I guess now's as good a time as any for an inaugural spin on the Wheel of Names. For those who don't know, patrons of Commander tier and above can suggest random names to be added to the wheel, and when we're introduced to a new minor character, we might give it a spin. It's fair to say uptake has been a little thin on the ground, but we're committed now, so let's do it at least once before abandoning the whole thing. Today's winner is Hyperspace Oppenheimer, volunteered by Commander Robin Castles. Hyperspace will be the first and, based on lack of interest, very possibly last suggestion for a name. Maybe we'll open it up to everyone for another role before taking the idea out back and shooting it. Anywho, we're told by Hyperspace Oppenheimer that this area is contested and we should get out of Krenim space. Curiously, Janeway doesn't react to the name Krenim by calling a red alert and kabooming the shit out of it. If you recall, Kez told us during her time travel wibblies last season that the Krenim were going to mess Voyager up good and proper, so a little cautious murdering would perhaps be prudent. Instead, Janeway takes the diplomatic path, saying she thought this was Zal territory based on what Seven said. This annoys Hyperspace Oppenheimer, who tells us to bugger off again. Janeway says that's not going to happen unless he has a bigger gun, and he turns around, presumably to get reinforcements. Janeway orders us on to meet the Zal, apparently not recognizing the name Krenim at all, which is rather odd. A few days later, we finally meet up with the Zal. They explain that the Krenim used to be in control of this area of space, conquering it through the use of temporal weapons. That ended when the Zal fought back and dismantled much of the Krenim military, so we should probably ignore them. The Krenim have other ideas, and Hyperspace Oppenheimer returns to make some more threats. A bit of antagonism between Krenim and Zal is interrupted by Kim detecting a time wibbly from the Zal homeworld. A shockwave appears, erasing the Zal ships and their envoy, whilst also upgrading the Krenim ship so that it now resembles the one seen in the Kez time travel episode last season. Voyager's altered too, becoming damaged and gaining a corpse. Looks like our crew weren't insulated from the timeline change, as Janeway doesn't notice anything different. For her, this is just the latest attack by the Krenim who, until now, haven't even responded to her hails. Tangentially, I presume we're supposed to infer from this that the previous timeline changes by Clarence and the Screwdriver ship are why Janeway didn't recognize the name. Hyperspace Oppenheimer orders a now outgunned Janeway to surrender. She tells him to balls, and we get ready for pooping. There's a problem, though. The Krenim are attacking us with time fireworks, and we're apparently now in a timeline where Kez never told Janeway about all that, so they're getting through our shields. Tuvok figures it out anyway, and after telling Janeway, she decides we should probably leg it. As we scarp her to lick our wounds, Janeway tells Tuvok to analyze the time fireworks, so we're ready when they turn up again. On the Screwdriver ship, Clarence Boddicker is playing with his pet hare. A subordinate arrives to tell him erasing the Zal homeworld has restored the Krenim Empire, but Clarence disagrees. It's only 98%, and there's a particular colony that didn't come back, presumably the place where he got his pet hare. He won't be happy until it's all restored, a goal that Subordinate takes issue with. They've been at this time-fiddling bollocks for 200 years, safely protected from aging by the ship, and this is the closest they've ever come. He and the rest of the crew think they should take the win, not least of which because Clarence's obsession is starting to feel a bit weird. But Clarence is in charge, and he says no. They've got the whole of eternity to achieve their task, and if it takes a few millennia for him to get the rest of his pet hare back, so be it. Voyager's been in Zal/Krenim space for a month now, and the ship has looked better. Having those time fireworks thrown at us probably isn't helping, especially as they're still getting through our shields. So much so that the entirety of Deck 5 needs to be evacuated due to some power wibblies. That's far from ideal given that it's the deck with sickbay on, and the doc needs to remove his patients. If we're following what happened in Kez's flashbacks, he'll be taking over the mess hall and solve 2 health problems at once. It's not all bad news, as the attacking Krenim ship has some aft shield issues, though that'd be easier to exploit if our weapons weren't buggered. We can't launch fireworks, so instead we're going to open the torpedo doors and drop some like mines. We fart them out and they impact the front of the Krenim ship. Thankfully, they've chosen to ignore that it was their aft or rear shields which were downed, and they kaboom anyway, which I think is very sporting of them. Unfortunately, that power problem on Deck 5 has become very serious indeed. The doc's guiding everyone into a Jeffries tube to get them out. Well, nearly everyone. 2 people appear from behind a damaged door and run towards him, but they're out of time, and he's forced to close it. The entire deck kabooms with some rather questionable masking work on that initial explosion effect. Tuvok tells us about the fatalities, whilst also mentioning that the doc is setting up a triage facility in the mess hall. Day 46+1, and Voyager looks like shit. B'Elanna and Kim are trapped in a turbolift, trying to keep entertained whilst waiting for rescue. It comes in the form of Seven, and off Kim and B'Elanna go to get some medical help. Which leaves Seven to perform some repairs in B'Elanna's place. In a Jeffries tube, we come across a familiar sight. It's that unexploded time firework from the episode where Kez warned us about the Krenim. Seven informs Tuvok about it, and he comes to take a look. While he does, we shift to the doc's new home. Paris is treating B'Elanna, though, according to the rules of triage, he shouldn't be. She's not in danger, just in pain, and the doc orders him to move on. He's more pissy than usual, and Paris tries to find out why. It's because of the 2 people he was forced to leave to die when Deck 5 kaboomed. Whilst the right choice, Paris's behaviour is reminding him of it. He's using this chance to convince himself that he was right, that emotion would have done more harm than good, and its inclusion is a nice little nod to the growth of his personality. Back to that Jeffries tube, and Tuvok has joined Seven for a poke around some high explosives. Not for long, as it's about to go bang. Tuvok orders them out, an order Seven ignores so she can do time science to the firework and figure out its temporal thingy. Job done, and Tuvok drags her away, but it's too late, and the time firework pops. Jump forward nearly 3 weeks. Voyager still looks like complete arse, and the replicators are mostly down. Thankfully, so is Neelix's kitchen, so we're all on ration bars. As an aside, I note Neelix is in uniform as he was during the Kez episode, so that's a nice touch. Up on the bridge, a novice mustachioed Chakotay is giving Janeway a gift for her birthday. She hasn't the time for such frivolity, even one with such an interesting backstory, and orders it to be recycled into food or medicine. We switch to Tuvok's quarters, where we learn he wasn't killed by the time firework. Some fumbling for a towel after he cuts himself shaving suggests his eyes are proper shagged, though. Seven arrives and reports for duty, oddly calling him Lieutenant again. That's the second time, and I'd put it down to shortening his rank for efficiency, but the protocol for doing so would be referring to him as the higher portion, so Commander, not Lieutenant. If we're generous, we could say she's inferred this shortening to be correct, based on 7 of 9 being truncated to 7. The more logical explanation is that his promotion wasn't passed on to other writers, and it's hardly the first ranking balls upon the show, so let's ignore it once again. Anywho, the diagnosis of his sight proves accurate. Seven admonishes him for not accepting her help with personal grooming, a little nod to Vulcan pride despite their pursuit of logic. As she laces his boots for him, she tells him that she may have figured out a way to make the shields work against Krenim time fireworks. They depart to perform some tests, but the universe has other plans and they're interrupted by a Krenim attack. We'll have to test them in battle. The test is a success and the shields absorb any damage. Janeway gives them a call to explain that their pointy sticks don't work anymore and they should sod off. We receive no reply. Looks like things are about to change again. Clarence Bodica's screwdriver ship arrives at another planet. We're erasing a different species this time to see what happens, or possibly just for the lols. They poop some blue and the planet turns a different colour as we track the shockwave and see what happens. Back on Voyager, that Krenim ship is still following us, apparently not sure quite what to do. The problem solves itself as the time shockwave hits, except things are a little different this time. That new shielding prevents the shockwave from changing Voyager, and we instead watch as the Krenim ship turns back into the tiny version we saw at the start of the show. Oh, and our scans show that most of the Krenim colonies in the area are gone too. Looks like Clarence has fucked it up. Janeway wants to know what just kicked off and goes to the new astrometrics lab with Seven to find out. They're not the only ones who want to know what happened, as Clarence is a bit miffed at taking his own people back to a pre-warp stage. Subordinate may have the answer and tells us there's an anomaly for which they haven't calculated, one that's distinctly Voyager-shaped. Clarence is unimpressed and decides to pay us a visit, perhaps to show us his state-of-the-art bang-bang. Down in astrometrics, we're comparing the pre-Wibbly scans with the post-Wibbly scans, and it doesn't look great for the Krenim. They're all but gone, only a tiny portion of space held by them now. As an aside, this is still quite an impressive area if, as Subordinate stated earlier, their species is now pre-warp. We track the origin of the shockwave to a planet that was previously a homeworld for one of the species in the area, but has a distinct lack of them now. Janeway concludes someone's dicking around with time, but further conversation is prevented by Clarence turning up in the screwdriver ship. He wants samples of Voyager to figure out the effects we've had on their calculations, and nicks both Chakotay and Paris to run some tests. He also gives us a call and explains that, while he bears us no ill will, he's going to have to erase us from time. The screwdriver ship poops blue at us and our shields start to weaken until we realise we can outrun them, so we leg it, though Voyager itself isn't fond of this plan and starts to collapse. We'll come back for Chakotay later. Maybe Paris too, if we're feeling generous. Later, in the mess hall/sickbay, Janeway's gathered everybody to tell them that Voyager is screwed and they should abandon ship to see if they can make it on their own. She and the senior staff will stay to see what they can do, and as the escape pods fly away, we're told the story is to be continued. I prefaced this once again with my dislike of time travel stories, but you know what? I don't hate it. The mixture of nods back to previous foreshadowing, plus there being some actual changes, makes this interesting enough to want to see where it's going. Of course, the standard time travel complaint of it all being erased at the end could still happen, but it would be petty of me to not applaud things I've been asking for now that they're happening, even if only for a while. Here's hoping we're allowed to keep them. End of Part 1.
Well, this is bullshit.